Ara tēnā tata katoa whakarau I ka mai nei, nau mai hara mai ki roto I o koutou whare. Tēnei, hei karakia ki te mihi rawa atu rā ki te wauku a tāne, ki a papa tuanuku e horake nei. Nau mai rā tāna kakautau ki te auro pi kupike e puti kia mā taki nei te tini e te manana ku koe te ki atu ki te wau tapu nui a tāne. Miroi e tāne, kokoa e tāne, rangahau e tāne, takotu atu I rangi te tāta I turu ana mai, o te wai o te iko rongorongo e patoa mai nei I te kōmuru nuria. Tenei te tau tuia ki a rangi nui e tū nei, tuia ki a papatua nuku e taputo nei. Ka rongo te motu te au I te kōrero puata I te māra māhunuku māra māhurangi. Ka tau mai, te ai o rangi, a tāne tokarangi, tāne māhuta, tāne nui a rangi, kai roti te wāku, kai roti te kaukauoro, kai roti te ngāhe. Maranga mai rā I te tōtara nui, ngā tōtara haimata. Ara, ngā kahikatia, ngā pohutukawa, ngā kai, ngā huo o tā, o papatuanuku, o rangi nui e tuake nei, kia tata e whakarau I ka mai nei. I te whakarewa atu rā, tēnei kōrero, I ngā whakahuatia mai rā, mai ngā kōrema, mai tēnā pito, mai tēnā pito, mai tēnā pito o te motu. E rongo whakairi he kirunga, turu o iti waka maua kia tīnā, ui e tae ki nau mai hara mai ki o koutou ngāhere. Te ngāhere kōrero, ka huri atu tā rākau kōrero, I a koe Simon, Renee tāna. Kia ora.
Thank you, Kura, for that very beautiful karakia that set the tone for this evening. I have to just cover off a couple of health and safety bits. One is that if there is an emergency of any kind, we follow the directions of security personnel. Secondly, this is a movie screening, so let's turn our phones to silent or off. And thirdly, given this is a sitting week and our Q&A runs through 7:30, we'll be presented by the alarm bells and or division bells and lights at about 7:20, so let's not be too alarmed with that. Okay, so on behalf of all of the trustees of Pure Advantage, I'd like to welcome you all here to the Theaterette in the Beehive in Wellington for the global premiere of Think Like a Forest. I'm Simon Millar, the Executive Director of Pure Advantage and the producer of Think Like a Forest. Now, there's a lot of people to thank in these kinds of projects, and we've done well at the end, credits to do that for the organizations and the people, but because we've got some of the amazing cast and creative technical crew with us here tonight, I would like them just to raise their hands, stand up, and let's have a look at how beautiful those faces are. That doesn't work for the online audience as well, but I'll just start. So we've got Sam Rowland, we've got Renee Raroa, we've got Shannon Bennett, we've got Damon Salmond, we've got Jordan Tibble, we've got Graham Atkins, we've got Matt Iremonger, and we have Sam the Trapman. We also have Professor David Norton out the back. We have our editor, Matt Clements, down there. And we have our post-production director, Jess Feast, in the room also. Have I missed anyone from the cast? But thank you so much. And Al Guthrie, our photographer, right here. So thank you. So recloaking Papatuanuku, recloaking Mother Earth, restoring our Earth Mother, is an action we take now for the benefit of future generations. The urgency is born out of the growing frequency of extreme weather events, and it offers a solution to our climate and biodiversity crises. Think Like a Forest brings this vision to life, and it shows how deeply connected our communities are to forests. And it highlights the role native forests play in providing resilience to our climate and biodiversity. Now, we know that farmers around the country, rural communities Communities all around New Zealand, in fact, all of us, like to plant and restore native forests for environmental, for cultural, and for economic. But we're subject to economic and regulatory barriers and labour constraints. Think Like a Forest presents solutions to these challenges. Solutions that align with our international obligations, climate, trade, reputation, and they provide a path forward. Particularly in light of the International Court of Justice's recent ruling on greenhouse gas responsibility. Recloaking Papatuanuku reframes nature restoration as a strategic investment, unlocking the true economic value of our ecosystem services, backed by the best available science. Securing durable carbon sinks, far outperforming those presented by carbon farming. Recloaking Papatuanuku should be the cornerstone of a cost-effective new climate change and landscape resilience plan that integrates all of these benefits for generations, where we design systems that work with nature, not against it. Ultimately, Think Like a Forest is a rallying call, not just to see the forest for the trees, but for the diversity, the future, and the resilience that they represent. Now, in this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, flooded, burning world, we all have a role to play to make this happen. What's yours? You don't have to answer that right away. That's it. Okay. All right. So for opening remarks and to formally launch our film tonight, the Minister of Climate Change, the Minister of Revenue, the Minister of Local Government, and the Minister for Energy, and someone who really has an amazing impact on helping make Recloaking Papatuanuku a reality, and someone who we've gone full circle with really since we launched it at COP in 2023 with WWF. Please welcome the Honourable Simon Watts.
Geez, this is quite tall, but tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. A very warm welcome to the Beehive, a warm welcome to the theaterette. And I'm not sure about too many people in the room, but this is sort of the first movie premiere that I've been here. So I'm pretty much what's standing between the movie getting going and that. But I want to recognise Simon and the team at Pure Advantage. They are an inspirational team that have shown leadership. It was about 72 hours into my ministerial career when I was in Dubai as a climate minister. And the first event, actually one of the few first events that I ever attended as Minister of Climate Change, was the launching of Recloaking Papatuanuku. And that is a significant initiative. To be here this evening, to be able to reflect the work and acknowledge the crew and the team that have been part of the creation, the design of this, congratulations and well done. One of the major strategies and part of components of our climate strategy last year was the inclusion of nature-based solutions as part of the 5-pillar plan. Subsequent to that, we've released, through discussions with Pure Advantage as well, a mechanism in order to undertake afforestation on Crown land, and in particular looking for opportunities to partner with iwi Māori, private sector and the Crown to plant native forestry on what is quite a significant amount of Crown land that we do have available that is currently underutilised. And so that is a mechanism in order to, in effect, help us to turn the words into action, but bring this component and this concept to life. So, we're starting on that journey, and I think for those in the room that have been part of this from the start, thank you for that. I think the opportunity that sits in front of us is significant. And the challenge for all of us in our room, the challenge that you played out to the room is that we all have a role in getting us from where we are today to where we want to be and should be in the future. And that's not just government. Government are one part and one component of that team, but in that context, we are all on the same team trying to get in that direction. And if we can all play our part to do that, then we can make what we're about to see a reality. So thank you very much. And with that, let's play.
For me, climate change is only too real. I come from Gisborne. We have been absolutely clobbered by severe weather events over the last couple of years. Cyclone Gabriel was really devastating for the East Coast community. We had rivers come through our homes. It shut down a lot of our farming operations, which had a huge economic impact on our people. Extreme weather events are becoming more frequent, but the devastating impact of flooding and erosion in our whenua, it's nothing new. When our original native forests in Tairāwhiti were cleared and converted to pasture, the steep hillsides gave way in heavy rain. It was an absolute disaster. Pines were planted with the hope of stabilising the land and supporting our local economy. But as we found with Cyclone Gabriel, those same pine plantations were far less resilient than our native forests. The problem was that those pine trees were a monoculture and they had single root systems that were all the same depth. So when you got saturation of water, whole swathes of forest fell into our rivers. The pine slash that got washed off the hill was hurled along the rivers like missiles, really, clearing out the forests and the vegetation along those riverbanks and folding them into the rivers and sending them out into the seas and onto our beaches. That was confronting, but the thing that was most confronting, I guess, was that we, in this day and age, are making decisions that will impact the next generation and the generation after that. It really hit home that we need to be conscious about building a future that is sustainable and that is solid for our landscapes. If we don't figure out a market driver, financial mechanisms to get diverse native forests back on our hills, our region and our people are in real trouble. Recloaking Papatūānuku is a long-term vision, but there's no time to waste. It'll take all of us working together. To bring back resilience to our landscapes, we need to think like a forest.
Raroa and I love eating people in the bush, and this fern here, moku, is one of our favourites.
I'm Sam the Trap Man. I'm a hunter, I'm a fisher, I'm a trapper. I just love getting out amongst it. The bush looks after us, so I reckon it's my job to look after the bush too. I'm not alone. All over Aotearoa, people are already working to recloak Papatūānuku. I'm going to meet some of them and hear about their work. We're going to explore how we can restore, regenerate and protect diverse native forests at scale and why this is so important and urgent right now.
Forests are amazing. They provide habitat for so many native species and they keep our water clean, they keep our hills together, they give us oxygen, that's useful. They provide food for us, it's just endless.
We've got weeds and we've got pest species that are throwing our ngahere out of balance. It's actually our responsibility as the ones who have brought those species in to return that balance. So it's quite obvious that we've got a role to play in the forest ecosystem.
These trees have been here a lot longer than farming's been in this environment. It's about using those natural assets to actually have a mosaic within the landscape of highly productive areas of the farm whilst protecting a whole lot of really important biodiversity.
When we're talking about recloaking Papatūānuku, we're talking about weaving. You know, we need to make sure the productive land stays productive, and it's about weaving farming and horticulture, making sure that we've got proper cloak on the erodible slopes and around the waterways. And I think we need that all across the country.
Graham Atkins is one of the most knowledgeable people I know when it comes to plants. He's an ecologist, a hunter and a farmer who's been working to regenerate our landscapes in Tairāwhiti for more than 3 decades. What is the work that you're most excited about at the moment?
Pretty much tile mahi spins my wheels, and so a big part of that is restoration mahi, so restoration ecology. I just believe that there's space for what we need as humans to survive and pay our bills, but there's also space for the original owners of this whenua, our indigenous flora and fauna. Over my time, 30 years working in this space, I've watched a lot of species, plants especially, go from once upon a time being common, they're just not there anymore in decent numbers, and that just relates to the spread of deer, possums and goats. But we can manage their numbers whereby we get ecosystem recovery, which has to be number one, because you're nothing without healthy tile.
The damage caused by these browsers means the impact of climate change on our tile is even worse. It seems to be one of the things that we need to do is retain the water in our landscapes, both so that it doesn't run off the hills into our rivers, but also to retain moisture to prevent fire risk. What role do you think native forest plays in retaining moisture and water in our landscapes?
I can recall when there was just moss carpet, and it was on the trunks, on all the branches, in the canopy and all over the floor. That whole thing there was all about swelling and heavy rain, and then slow releasing, you know, so it regulated stream flows throughout the year. On the lowlands, that giant sponge would re-energise all the aquifers, and so huge impact. When you talked about climate change and what lies ahead, to me that's the priority, is to get that those protection values back, because it's a waste of time trying to save the kiwi if the kiwi's home is falling to pieces. And so get those protection values back and then go from there. So big mahi.
Graham is a trustee at Waikiruru Eco Sanctuary on the Waimata River. It's places like this that give me hope. Malcolm Rutherford has been working with landowners here to restore the native ngāhere and bring diversity back to this landscape. Brother, we are here at Waikiruru Sanctuary, and this here is a really unique and important forest system for our region. Why is that?
25 years ago, this was farmland. And right since the start, it's been really well looked after. There's been predator control and deer and goat control. And so there's actually a really wide range of species in what looks like in places just Kānuka forest. It's got amazing things underneath it, and they're just waiting to get going. They're waiting for a light gap to go through and become that next canopy.
Dame Salmon and her whānau have been working on restoring Waikiruru since they bought the property 25 years ago.
When we arrived, it was all pasture. It was absolutely bare.
Like normal sheep and beef farms?
Yeah, that's what it was.
What are some of the tools that you use to bring this back?
Well, we were really lucky because we have this beautiful stretch of old bush right along the edge of the Waimata here. The first thing we did was we took advice from Doc and we fenced it. We planted large groves of berry-bearing trees for the birds right along the foothills. That's all cyclone boulder slump. And it worked. As soon as those trees started cropping, then they flew up into the hills. And they planted the hills for us largely.
Nestled in the heart of Waikiruru is the 1769 seed archive.
1769 was when the Western world on the Endeavour met Te Ao Māori, and everything in this country changed. their garden has so many of those stories baked into the design of the garden, the plant selection.
I'm really interested in the role the 1769 garden plays in regenerating our landscape.
We actually call the garden the 1769 Seed Archive. And one of the things about conservation in New Zealand often is that it's protected. If something's protected, you can't touch it. And we're like, no, this is protected, but come, take cuttings, take seeds, because we've got to get this stuff out there.
You work with some of our amazing landowners, some incredible farmers, some incredible foresters. What do you think the appetite is in Tairāwhiti for concepts such as recloaking papatūānuku?
Well, I think the exciting thing is that it's really, you can see the change. Some of my landowners I work with, I had one in particular who, the first contact I had with him was, how do I get rid of this covenant? I want to put my cattle in there and graze it. And on the most recent visit, this is kind of 8 years on, he's like, come and look at the riparian planting I've done. And that's not because of me, that's because of a whole change in the way people are seeing biodiversity on farms. And every little bit of that bush on farms helps in so many ways.
Both the old growth and the regenerating forests at Waikereru were crucial to the resilience of this whenua during the recent cyclones.
The Waimata River was the river that delivered all those logs that just about took out the bridges in town here in Gisborne and landed up all over the beaches and in the bay. And the thing that happened here at Waikereru is because we have this stand of surviving native bush, the roots of that stand of forest, which is really old, that held the riverbank together.
Diverse forests and those interconnected roots and that huru layer sitting on top of it. That's the forest that we saw stay on the hill.
The thing that I've learned about natural forest is that it's layered, so everything's doing a job. The hills here, we only had one small slip. That's about 12 years of regeneration.
I've got some really big questions around the economics of recloaking papatūānuku. A lot of our farmers are cash poor and time poor.
Yes.
When it comes to Tairāwhiti, recloaking papatūānuku is something that we all want. But how do we implement it here at home?
Well, for me, I'd far prefer that the finance actually comes locally, because in the end, it's going to be a question about who is the guardian of this place. I'm a member of the Waimata Catchment Group Committee, so we know every farmer in the catchment. Sheep and beef farming is hard at the moment economically. It's not as though they've got a whole lot of money to spend on trapping and fencing and things like that. As you know, this sort of work never stops. And so we need a long-term vision. I do think that the government and any government ought to take responsibility for the future of our beautiful islands, because that's the future of our people as well. The farmers love looking after their land in this way and still then being able to make a living. And if they could make a living partly by recloaking papatūānuku around the waterways and on those highly erodible parts of the farm.
In those less productive landscapes.
Totally.
We just need the financial models and the political backing to achieve this great vision.
Mana whenua are leading the way when it comes to recloaking papatūānuku. Renee Raroa has been doing amazing mahi on her ancestral whenua and finding innovative ways to fund it.
For our whenua at Te Kotuku, we are underway with regeneration of the whenua, so it's over 900 hectares there. We have a beautiful Ngā Whenua Rahui block that's had some protection already, so we can look at the species and the biodiversity that we have in there and say, how can we bring that back to the landscapes that we'd cleared for pasture?
On the coast here, we're in such a unique position. Like, we must have one of the highest amounts of whenua Māori percentage-wise out of any region, hey? How do you think reforesting our landscapes can happen in a way that fits with whenua Māori?
There is so much opportunity in the knowledge that we've gained over generations and generations of evolving with our landscapes, that we can carry through to solutions for recloaking our whenua. But there's also some challenges. To get resource onto whenua Māori, to borrow against it is a real challenge because there's not the same equity in the land because you can't sell it. You've got hundreds of stakeholders. For some whenua Māori, you haven't even got decision makers on that land block, so you might not even have a trust set up to make the decision. So yeah, there's plenty of challenges there, but I think if we can lean into designing first for whenua Māori, then we will come up with solutions that work for all land types.
We struggle to get funding into region to do a lot of this work, but the levers that you have been able to pull are just phenomenal.
Economic viability for our whenua has always been a challenge. So we've always had to be a little bit creative, I suppose, with our revenue streams for that whenua. And now what we're looking at is, hey, how can we create new revenue streams that are actually as much as possible in alignment with our roles as kaitiaki of that whenua. For a point in time, we did a little bit of regenerative tourism, so that's one thing that is closer to alignment, but another is to have the data and the information from that whenua that tells our story, that shows the awesome work that's being done, actually monetised. So I see data as another way of telling our story, and it's a form of storytelling that markets can see. So what we've been exploring is nature markets and how we might use those nature markets to bring more resource into our regeneration projects for the whenua on our own terms.
So people are genuinely interested in our biodiversity in Aotearoa as overseas international funders.
We often don't realise how special we are here and how much we have an opportunity to protect the remaining biodiversity that exists on the planet. Internationally, there is a big interest in supporting places that can enable more nature to exist, because when you enable nature and help to restore it in one place, it actually has a global impact. And so that's what a lot of these markets are looking for.
Nature markets are emerging, but the carbon market has been around for a while now. I want to learn more about how it can impact the movement to recloak Whawhatuanuku. My friend, ecologist Professor David Norton, understands a lot about forest ecology and conservation, and also about carbon in different types of forests. So what role does native forest play in the carbon sector?
Yeah, plays two really important roles. So first of all, our existing old growth forests, they're holding huge amounts of carbon in the biosphere. If we look after those, that carbon stays in the biosphere. So they're stores of carbon. But then these new forests, like this little planting we're in here now, these are sequestering, drawing carbon down out of the atmosphere. And the great thing about these forests is that they're permanent.
Where I come from, up in Tairāwhiti, we're starting to see forests go into permanent pine plantation as carbon forests. And then we're hearing also that native forests sequester carbon. And so often for landowners, we are wondering, should we go to pines for the short-term gains, or should we go for native forests with the hope that it delivers carbon sequestration over time?
There's no two ways about it. Pine trees sequester a lot of carbon over the first 30, 40 years of their life. Then that curve of carbon being sequestered flattens off, and those forests will eventually collapse, because pine forests are early, fast-growing trees. They don't form long-term permanent forests. When those trees start dying and losing their carbon, who's going to be responsible for replacing that carbon, and who's going to pay for that?
Right.
The guys who planted them have got all the credits, or your grandchildren and my grandchildren? Our native forests are much slower, so the curve will be a lot lower, coming up more slowly, but it will surpass the pine forest after maybe 60, 80, 100 years, and will continue to grow.
After interviewing other people on this journey, I think that there has to be some form of balance between the financial model and the environmental benefits, right? And so it seems that we do need a tool to be able to incentivize replanting native forests.
In my mind, there's two fundamental problems we're facing at the moment in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The first is that pine trees get an unfair incentive through the emissions trading scheme. There's a huge incentive there for people to put it into pine trees, as you described, with no consideration to the future. So ideally, we need to change those policy settings to account for future management of those pines, and that doesn't happen. But the second thing we need is we need to have a realistic incentive, maybe a carbon plus biodiversity type of credit that recognises all the other values that these native forests provide that pine trees can never provide. And once we've got that tool, then native forests are going to win hands down every time.
David has been central to the restoration of Te Ramoana bush here in North Canterbury. Its funding comes through Transwaste Canterbury, a public-private partnership between 5 local councils and Waste Management New Zealand. Gil Cox has supported the project right from the start.
The Transwaste company owns 1,300 hectares here. In the middle of that 1,300 hectares is a landfill. That's 37 hectares. It's tiny relative to the footprint. We saw the opportunity to offer back to the community a QE2 covenanted ecological recovery area, if you like, that we call Te Ramoana bush. People or businesses, when they have waste they have to dispose of, have to pay for it to be taken away. The profits that are earned are distributed back to shareholders. But prior to that, we put money back into the development of the bush, the tracks, and the replanting of the bush.
So you're treating the land, the landscape itself, as a shareholder?
Absolutely. This has got a 200 to 300 year vision, which is to take this part of the country back to East Coast, South Island, lowland forest. The only way it'll work in the long run if we've got consistency of investment. We have done exotic planting of both radiata and cypress, where we can take a commercial return off that forest and use that in the very long term, post the closure of the landfill, to continue the development of Te Ramoana bush, because you don't do these sort of things without some funding.
Funding the project in the short term allows you to create those long-term gains. Eh?
Absolutely.
Te Ramoana bush is in many ways a really good microcosm of what recloaking Papatūānuku is about. So we've got an old growth forest remnant which we're looking after. It's obviously protected now, there's no grazing animals. But we've also got natural regeneration. We're just allowing the forest to return of its own accord. And we're also enriching some of those forests by planting into them. So totara and matai, which are 2 of the podocarps that would have been really dominant here, and kaikatea, of course. When we're talking about nature and native forests, we're talking about the long term. So these trees here are, 16 years old. But this won't be representative of what might have been here at some point in the past for maybe 100 years. But it's worth waiting for. Remember, a mature totara might live for 400 years. So our lifespans are just a blink in the eye, in a sense, in terms of those trees.
I'm just sitting there thinking about 400 years of totara fruit.
How many grandchildren down the line is that?
And how many generations of kids that's feeding? You're just making me excited, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, and again, I just can't overemphasise this enough. It's not just about the carbon issues, it's not just about the water, it's not just about the biodiversity, it's what you're saying, it's about the people and how people can connect to this. And imagine your grandchildren or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren, I'm a little bit older than you, coming into here in 50 years' time and actually enjoying a forest.
There's still heaps of work to do to create financial models and incentives for long-term restoration projects. But different types of landowners are already finding ways to protect and restore our native ngāhere. Farmers around Aotearoa are such an important part of our vision to recloak Papatūānuku and return resilience to our landscapes, and many are already doing the mahi on the ground. On Banks Peninsula, Williston Farms is another haven of biodiversity. It's an interwoven landscape that combines protected old-growth forests, regenerating bush and livestock in a productive farming model. Matt manages the farm and Shannon works as a shepherdess. What are some of the actions you guys have taken on your place to ensure that you can have a productive farming system for the future and also alongside that have these beautiful forests flourishing?
So look, a couple of things. I guess that the important thing is we actually get support from a group of people to give us advice and to actually create a plan as to what we want to do for the long term. So we have a long-term biodiversity management plan. Certain areas that are more appropriate for biodiversity than farming, we're excluding livestock, and that means that we can actually concentrate our productive part of the farm on the areas where we're getting the most return. We're currently undertaking some possum control. Obviously the pigs and the goats has been a really big part of it because they've had the most impact, both on the biodiversity but also the productive farmland as well.
Shannon, how do you feel when you're out here mastering stock in this type of farming system?
It's pretty incredible. I love shepherding and I feel like I've got so much more to learn, especially here. I'm definitely very fast-paced, must be go, 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 go all the time, so I can get pretty wound up and tense at times, and I just love when you come out in country like this, you can slow down and just have the moment of not rushing. Most farmers love the environment. We love being outside in the nature, so it's definitely something that most farmers hold dear to their hearts.
I've noticed your streams are beautiful cobble-bottom streams. You have a lot of bush hugging those rivers, and so when it rains, you mustn't have a lot of dirt washing off into those creeks, because you've got the forest around those bank systems.
It's retaining water, but it's also protecting any sediment loss, any nutrient loss as well. But it is one of the real assets of this farm and farm system.
Up the coast from Gisborne, at Uawa, there's a special forest remnant called Pāroa. Mere Tamanui is one of our kaitiaki here. She understands firsthand the role the forest plays in the health of our people, our whenua and our awa, especially as the impacts of climate change increase. Our forests have been going through a lot of change in our generation, hey? We're starting to see some serious degradation coupled with large storm events, the impacts of climate change. You're also a freshwater specialist. Can you tell us a little bit about how the health of the forest impacts our awa?
I guess Kiutakitai, our highland forests, are just as important as our lowland forests, and being able to support and create a balanced ecosystem for our awa and our whenua along the way, connecting our aquifers with our awa and our puna. The cyclones have been a huge impact for our rohe, or the riverbed that's been smothered in sediment and silt. Our awa's unable to breathe. It's almost like I'm suffocating and choking myself. Waterways aren't just waterways for us. They're our cultural spaces of healing, of mahinga kai, of so many different ceremonies to be able to bring the oranga back to our whānau. So for healthy water, fresh water, means healthy people for us, and in order to have that, we need our forests. I love water, but I can't do water without trees.
So we are in this beautiful kahikatea, pukatea forest. Tell us about this piece of bush and how it connects to this wider landscape around us.
Well, this bush is hugely significant to our lowland forests. We don't have many of them left, but this is one of the strongholds that's able to, well, gather all the excess water that's coming down from the maunga. It's made up of all our pukatea and our kahikatea, our kiakia, our mokturepo. It is a sanctuary for our wildlife, for our manu, for our mahinga kai, our rongoa to collect. It's our kohanga reo to be able to come and harvest and share out those gems. It's a happy space, happy place, and we love to bring people in here. And I can guarantee you, after they've gone out, kia tau te wairu o rātou.
It really strikes me that there are so many different people around Aotearoa who want to see more native forests in our landscapes. Sam Rowland works at Tairāwhiti Environment Centre and helps to support our important mahi tile up and down the East Coast. We have many farmers that we work with as individuals. We have many catchment groups. We have many Māori trust blocks. We have people with so much experience to be able to roll out and establish forests, weed forests, maintain forests, do the browser and the predator control. Now seems like the perfect time to take action. How do people on the ground wanting to recloak the whenua access the financial support to be able to achieve what their aspirations are?
At the moment, it's few and far between, but
there's real opportunity to really get financing into region. We need to have these public-private partnerships to really push this forward. The role that Tairāwhiti Environment Centre plays is really just being able to connect together local government, central government, businesses, community, iwi hapu, all of those that should be playing this role, because we need to work together to solve this problem. It's not something that we can do in isolation.
When we're talking about recloaking Aotearoa, do you think regionally there's going to be different solutions to the same sort of problems?
100%, yeah. What we found in our region, we've had some great opportunities from money coming in, from central government, from businesses, but there's a lot of conditions attached to that, and usually it's not across the whole system. It's looking at certain parts. So here's some money to go and do predator control, you know, or go and do this component of it. What we've been trying to do a lot with our mahi is say, let's change that from the I'm a funder, I'm going to come in and dictate what you need to do as the person getting the funding, and let's move that model into more of a partnership model, and let's work together and let's co-create and let's make sure that we can meet everyone's needs. But at the core of that, we're all working for the same outcome, which is regenerating nature at scale. And the benefits from that are just huge.
One of the places I know that really shows these benefits is Titirangi near the centre of Gisborne. George Tibble has been working on the Whaia Titirangi restoration project through Te Poho o Rawiri Marae ever since I've known her.
When I experienced Titirangi as a young person, it was a place of pine trees, of pasture. But now when I come to Titirangi, it's a place of regenerating forests. How do you think that impacts our urban community?
People are starting to notice the changes up here, the bird life. I think it is having a pretty cool, positive impact on how we view our environment now. Being a hapu-led project in Tairāwhiti is huge. It means a lot to us as rangatahi coming into mahi. It's a lot different than planting pines and a 9-to-5 job. Being at Pohorauri and delving into tikanga and kawa and things like that, and then learning about that through our mahi here on Titirangi, it really, I don't know, it kind of strengthens you as a person. I guess it gives you more, well, for me personally, self-worth. It's understanding whakapapa, it's understanding rongoa, not for just yourself, but for the maunga and the awa.
If I was to ask you, George, what thinking like a forest means, what would you say?
Our forests go through all sorts of stuff, you know, so you got to be flexible, you got to be strong, and if something knocks you down, you just got to persevere and keep going, keep growing. Yeah.
Thinking like a forest reminds me that we are collective and diverse. The forest is not one tree on its own, ever.
I think of everything in the forest, an ecosystem. A forest to function needs to all work together. And I feel like that's exactly the same as a community. We need everyone all coming together to figure out how to regenerate at scale.
It's about thinking long term, not about tomorrow or next week or next year or the next election. It's about thinking right out there. And it's about thinking not only about the fact that the forests are going to be here for a long time, it's about thinking about those future generations of people.
For me, it's not about carbon solely. It's about everything that happens. It's about the life on the land and in the water. If you don't think like that, I don't believe you can bring it back to life.
Recloaking Papatūānuku is a call to action on many levels. It will require policy shift, innovative funding solutions, and it will also require communities putting trees in the ground, as well as doing the predator control and the browser control to keep them there. It's about creating those interwoven landscapes where both biodiversity and people can thrive. To me, thinking like a forest is about choosing to be part of our ecosystems.
It's about working more closely with nature and building resilience for our future together. This is kawakawa, and the females have long, voluptuous orange fruit in summer, and they are absolutely delicious. They taste like rock melon with a little peppery aftertaste. The thing is, though, that those fruit, they make you poo. The huru layer is made up of all these different beautiful palatable ferns. The goats and deer love to eat them too. So usually, where there's goats and deer present, there are hardly ever these tasty ferns to eat. These here are tawaka mushrooms, and they are absolutely delicious. Fungus plays an incredible role in our forest ecosystems. Do you know trees, they communicate not just through their roots, but through the mycelium networks, through those mushrooms as well. This is tātara moa. Tātara moa leaves help us brew up a really great sleepy tea. And when I have to sleep in the bush, sometimes with no hut, with no bedroll, just on the cold hard ground, I come to tātara moa.
Sam, Simon and the team, that was spectacular. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very, very much for putting that together. In fact, I think they deserve another round of applause. My name's Andrew Grant. I'm a fellow trustee of Pure Advantage, along with Damian Salmon and Stephen Tyndall, who are with us today. And look, we thank you for coming and joining us this evening. We really appreciate, on a beautiful Wellington evening, coming out and being with us. And we do, as Pure Advantage, really want to share some of the excitement that we have. I do think there are those moments in New Zealand's history where there is the sense of coming together around something that we genuinely can all agree with. We genuinely feel that it's the right thing to do, not just for us, but for future generations. But also when we really bring together those different perspectives, the best science, the best community perspectives, the best business modelling, the best not-for-profit perspectives, the community perspectives, the iwi perspectives. And one of the things that I think is just magical around recloaking Papatūānuku, there is that sense of Team New Zealand coming together, really believing that there's something beyond ourselves that's special about this, and a deep sense that this is not only the right thing to do, it is the rational thing to do economically, it's the right thing to do from the forest perspective, and there's just a common sense around when you think about creating resilience, given what we're dealing with climate change. It just has that resonance that this is profoundly the right thing to do. It doesn't mean it's the easy thing to do. And one of the things we also want to share with you, and Simon led with that call to action, we deeply believe this plan stacks up. It really does focus on the long term and doing the right thing from a long-term perspective. The economics really stack up, the science really stacks up. But there are some challenges to lean into, and we're very open and transparent around what those challenges are. And we'd like to share with you with a panel discussion for the rest of the session to unpack a little bit more for you just, what those perspectives are that we've brought together, but also to give you a little bit more fidelity on the thoughtfulness that's gone into this, some of the next steps that we're planning on, but also just to give you a sense of, what really gives us excitement. What are some of those challenges that we're leading into that you may have a perspective, you may be able to help us in thinking those things through. But also to, I guess one of the core premises when you're looking at something that is as holistic, as complicated as this, we really want to make sure that we're genuinely thinking down the road and doing the right thing. One of the things that worried us when we started up front and when we do look at some of the, well-intentioned solutions to climate change, like I would argue that lock up carbon with radiata, is a little bit like being the generation that introduced stoats to deal with rabbits.
And we really don't want to be that generation. We don't want to have that on us, that we weren't thoughtful enough or didn't provide enough foresight to really think through and making sure that it, you know, that the picture really stacks up and that there aren't unintended consequences long term. So we also want to put ourselves up to be challenged and to have you look in and interrogate and kick the wheels whether or not you think, you know, we're thinking about it in the right way. Because also, you know, New Zealand has very different, you know, biodiversity, and what works in Te Rāwhiti may not work in Fiordland, may not work in Waipawa, may not work in the Manawatu. So again, we want to make sure that it's also fit for purpose and has that ability to flex for different parts of New Zealand. So look, we had the privileges with Pure Advantage of partnering with WWF New Zealand. And we're very honoured that Jamie Fowler is with us, one of the leaders of WWF New Zealand, with us this evening. And Jamie's going to convene a panel with some very august guests and myself to just talk and unpack a little bit more for you the thinking behind recloaking Papatūānuku, and again, what excites us, but also what are the challenges that we're also seeking to lean into to really make this real. And not only make it real, but I think it's something that we can genuinely be proud of internationally. And it is something that I do think you heard a little bit in the video, the demand and the excitement around this, not only in New Zealand, but internationally. I think there is something, you know, incredibly marketable and an opportunity that we have to create, you know, a sizable industry and export opportunity in terms of what we can do to really bring in world-class capital and perspectives in other people into New Zealand. So, Jamie, if I can hand over to you, and Jamie will introduce the rest of the panel, but a warm round of applause. Please welcome Jamie up onto that. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Andrew. Tēnā koutou katoa. It's a real privilege to be here this evening, co-hosting the event with Pure Advantage and sharing tonight's kōrero with some of the stars from our film. I think you guys will all agree after seeing that film that there's some really compelling stories in there around kaitiaki and why our ecosystems matter to us. So without further ado, let's dig in to what it means to actually think like a forest and what we can do to accelerate this. So please join me in welcoming Sam, Renee, and Matt to the stage with Andrew. Welcome. So this is the first time some of you guys have seen the film, right? What do you think? Are we giving it 2 thumbs up? Yeah? Approve? Renee, let's start with you. What does it mean in practice to think like a forest? And from your perspective, what can we achieve if we think like a forest?
Yeah, okay. Kia ora koutou. I guess the idea of thinking like a forest, to me, reminds us that we are part of nature, not separate to it, and then that we have a role to play in the ecosystem. So as humans, we have hands and hearts and minds, and therefore it's all of the activities that we can do to support that ecosystem to thrive, from pest control and weed control and eco-sourcing our seeds and growing native seedlings and planting them out, and monitoring and observing and kind of being part of that. I think we've got a real opportunity, and Te Rāwhiti is an example of where on scale communities are needing to come together, being forced in a way, you know, you saw the damage at the beginning of the film there, to come together and collectively work on the issues that face us with increased extreme weather events and the need to restore and regenerate the landscapes that we live in.
Kia ora for that. The stories in the film around regeneration were incredibly powerful. From your perspective, how important is it, because we know it's not just about regeneration, how important is it that we're protecting the old growth forests that remain?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's not like we're just starting from scratch. The remnants, as you saw in the film, the existing old growth forests, they are providing us the seed source. They're holding the taonga species, the flora and fauna that that we aspire to bring back to some of the other parts of the land. As you saw, where we've got those old growth forests removed, our landscapes can really suffer. And so it's important that our biodiversity corridors are re-established so that often our flora and fauna can do the job for us. Our birds can fly in between these forest remnant blocks and drop the seeds for the next generation of those forests coming through. But probably just as importantly, these old growth blocks and remnant forests provide us a glimpse to the past and to our future, and so reminds us that yes, we do have to think intergenerationally beyond the lifespans of humans into the lifespans of these forests. And I think, yeah, those old growth forests are our connection both to our past but also to what's possible for our landscapes.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's take it over to Sam. You're on the other side of the questions this time, Sam. We know there's huge carbon sequestration benefits from this work. But can you talk us through, I guess, some of the other benefits of building resilience into the landscape?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the cyclones were really confronting, and a lot of we were working with multi-generational farmers to build back from the cyclone and recover from the cyclone. So a lot of those older farmers were telling me about bola. And their solution to bola was planting pine trees, right? And we heard yesterday the Earth Science New Zealand report. They were speaking of how during the cyclones, the grass pasture had the most slips on it. The pine forest did a little bit better, but that native forest really had very little slippage on it at all. And so what I guess I see the strength of native forests is that when they're placed in those really high-risk areas, they slow down water. They absorb water. And if the NIWA 90-year data is anything to go by, where they're saying higher intensity rainfall events and actually higher likelihood of drought as well, we are posed with increased flooding and posed with fire risk as well. So what we need is to retain that moisture, retain that water in the landscape. And as Graham said in the film, and you saw the depth of that moss that he pushed his hand down into, that absorbs water as it rains. And as that water is absorbed and retained, when it heats up in the summer, it discharges that water into the ground. So it's our natural buffer of those high intensity rainfall events. And my hope is when we establish forests, we get that hoodoo layer that's able to build the soil, and we get that moss coming back, we're going to see less impacts of floods for our urban communities. We're going to see less risk of fires into our pine plantations. And that's the real value of recloaking Papatūānuku, in my opinion.
That long-term durability of the system. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Over to you, Matt. You've ditched the beard. Almost didn't recognize you there in the film. It's amazing to see what you've achieved at Williston Farms, and I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit about how you got support to do that work.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's an interesting story about the beard, in actual fact, because, and I'm surprised you brought it up, but I can't compete with Sam and his impressive beard. But speaking of support, so the reason I had a beard was we were going through started a consenting process. And that consenting process, I decided not to shave until we got a consent. And that took nearly 12 months. And that consent cost a significant amount of money and was through local government. And these are one of the challenges that we've got as farmers is this consent was a land use change consent that was going to, or has, reduced in-loss by 70%, ecology loading by 65%, and P-loss by 30%, and yet it took us all of that time to actually transact that consent to make that change. And that consent not only is a fantastic outcome for the environment, but also creates significant increased revenue for the business, and that revenue can then go back into the things that we want to protect for the long term. So that's why I had the beard.
Great story. I guess, should I ask what the neighbors think about the work that you're doing? Are they on board as well? Are they keen?
Yeah, so look, we live in an environment on Banks Peninsula where we're a large commercial farming operation, and we have 47 neighbours, and so we have a range of views. So we have all sorts of people that have positive and challenging views as to what we do. One of the things that I think we lose a lot is the ability to communicate sometimes some of the positive things that happen, and I think that's consistent across the country, where farmers, they love their land, it's their biggest asset, and we're seeing more and more those biodiversity values being valued by our funding partners and also our customers. And so I think we need more communication around what farmers are doing in that space and what they want to do more of. And what we need to see is better communication of that, which is an example of that tonight. But we also we need to see a movement away from regulation to facilitation, and that's a huge opportunity I think that we have for the agricultural sector to have less regulation on it and more assistance to get these outcomes that we all want as a community.
I guess kind of building on from that, is there anything more that local and central government can do to support farmers here?
Well, I think it's simply that we need to move away from regulation. New Zealand is almost a very unique globally, where we have a free market, non-subsidised agricultural system, but a lot of regulation. And if you go to other parts of the world, they have a lot more support. We have a lot more regulation. So what we as farmers are looking for is less regulation and more facilitation to help us achieve outcomes. So that's probably the call out for the Minister and the government to lead that, both nationally and through central government, but local government also.
Thank you for that. Andrew, we heard a little bit about it in the film, but not too much. But I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit more about the business opportunities here. Yeah.
Well, look, I think when you look what is emerging globally, there is no doubt that the world is starting to recognise the fundamental importance of intact nature and what intact nature does, the fundamental importance of having carbon sinks and these. Now, look, that hasn't happened in a straight line. It's not happening in a straight line, but those markets are emerging, and they're emerging at scale. I think in New Zealand, the confidence we need to have, we have the potential to create some of the very best product on earth. We have intact nature at scale. And we also, I mean, I agree with the points about regulation, but we also have most of those countries that have intact nature or huge biodiversity opportunities have fairly average governance, rule of law, all these things. New Zealand is top of the pile on those things. So our ability actually to craft product to shape into those international markets. And look, I think there's some opportunity locally, but given the level of ambition that we're talking about, I think we really need to say we are going to shape the gold standard of gold standards internationally. And look, I've had the privilege, just again with my previous, life, McKinsey was not known as sort of, tree hugging, loving, kind of greenies. We were accused of being the high priests of capitalism and the like. If you asked me, take any New Zealand product and sell it to the most sophisticated, international investors, I would pick this over anything. Over trying to sell PPPs and toll roads and prisons and, this is, in my view, this is the next Fonterra. This is the next genuine opportunity that we have because of just the endowment that we have. The opportunities, also some mistakes we've made, some very big opportunities. And Al from Zip, as the CEO of Zip, is here this evening. Removing predators is a massive opportunity given the number that we have and the damage that they do to our forests. But also the pace at which our forests recover. Now, look, they're not, it's not fast compared to exotic, but even compared to some other forests, if you lose a Brazilian rainforest, you virtually don't get it back. We have the luxury that if you do the right things, you can get it back in the New Zealand context to a standard that's not far off. So, look, my challenge is the potential is absolutely there. These markets are emerging. What I find confronting is many of the governments that I serve, the Singapores of the world, many of the Asian governments that don't have the endowment that we have, but they are hustling to build the product and to create the offering. And what I worry about a little bit is the old Sir Peter Jackson, that in New Zealand we saw it first, but we ended up being a buck short and a day late. And I think that's the real challenge here, is we've actually got to not muck around and negotiate against ourselves with unhelpful regulation, and not to, create rules that no one else is creating. I think there's a little bit of that mindset. We've got something really special. We can take it to the world. We can actually be the best here, but we can't be a buck short and a day late.
Thank you. We need to seize that opportunity then. Yeah. Renee, over to you again. In terms of funding, are public-private partnerships the way to go here? Or like what other innovative funding mechanisms do we need to be thinking about?
Yeah. Okay, I think, yes, there's definitely a place for public-private partnerships, because whilst government does need to come to the party and has an opportunity to activate and kickstart, government funding alone is not going to be enough to address the scale and the pace of the issues that we're confronted with. I think it's really important, though, what we've learned by being a kind of pilot of these new emerging data markets is that the design of the systems and the design of the tools and the infrastructure into these new innovative funding models, financing models, and ways to access resource need to be informed by and connected all the way through to those on the ground, where we get decision making and design only happening at a really high level. That we have things from the past that we can learn from, I suppose, in that space. So really important that the design of these things is connected all the way through to the ground, because that is actually where the resource needs to go into those making decisions on the ground. They're the closest to the whenua, to the environment, the special place of our tangata whenua, Indigenous peoples, mana whenua, in the understanding of the environment, the special knowledge that local peoples and the local communities hold, has to be woven through these tools. While we do need to move fast and with pace, we need to ensure that these are going to be intergenerationally able to solve the problems and to set us up for the future. Yeah.
Right. Just does anybody else want to add to that, or? No, it's very comprehensive. Thank you. Over to you, Sam. The connection between people and the environment is so beautifully captured in the film. And you spoke about kind of the role of people in the communities. And I'm wondering if you can share just a bit more about how important that is in all of this work.
People are simply made well by forests. There's so much science to back that up. I don't know if any of you have been for a walk in your local bush block or your local park after a stressful day of work. It's a real breathe out. And if we look at the structure of trees, I don't want to get all nerdy here, but if we want to look at the structure of trees, the tree has exactly the opposite bodily functions that we do. Our lungs are inside, and we breathe in oxygen and out carbon dioxide. The tree's lungs, which are its leaves, are on the outside, and they breathe out oxygen and breathe in carbon dioxide, which is quite helpful. If we look at the way that they think, our internal neurological pathways are in our brain, but a tree's neurological pathways are actually its roots communicating through the fungus, the mycelium network. So if you look at that, we don't necessarily need to think like forests. We need to think in relationship with forests. And I think that's the humans, I don't want to get all hippie on this, but I think that is the key to it, right? We can't exist as people or mammals without forests. And so I guess that is totally not answering your question, but that is our relationship with trees. Trees don't exist well without us, and we don't exist well without trees. So I'm always blown away with the trees' generosity to us. They're constantly trying to, I'm a bushman. I know Matua Graham there, like he teaches us so much in our region, and there's so much kai that the trees are constantly being generous trying to give us. And there's so much of our traditional rongoa Māori that our trees are still generously offering us. It's about time that we are generous back to those trees that are supporting us to live. That's all I've got to answer your question. I'm sorry.
That was lovely. We're a part of the ecosystem as well. And yeah, can't be separated from it, but integral to it. Awesome. Andrew, I think we're going to let you have the last word here. The film makes a very good case for the urgent need to recloak the whenua. Everyone in the audience should have a copy of the policy asks, but I wonder if you could talk us through them in kind of broad terms.
Well, look, thank you. And again, thank you to the panelists, and thank you again for being here today. Look, again, I guess a little bit just finishing in the way that Simon started around a call to action. There is something very special about when New Zealanders come together for a common purpose. I think we are truly exceptional as a nation in our ability to be innovative, our ability to tell a story, our ability to take things to the world. And for me, this really is one of those moments in our history. Maybe something that we've undertold a little bit is also with climate change, the resilience of what intact nature provides. We talked about with the moss and water retention, but the simple reality is when we do look at severe weather events, human solutions are incapable in many cases of actually leaning in to the scale and the severity. Nature is not. And I do think that, it gives very generously, but it's also arguably the superpower that we have as a protective cloak when we do look at the resilience that's going to be needed to protect our way of life, to protect our farming systems, to protect, the health and wellness for our kids and our grandkids going forward. And if one thing I worry a little bit, again, that Peter Jackson, it's like people sort of get it, but there's not the urgency, there's not the... and I guess our call to action today is that the old Winston Churchill, for evil to prosper, all it takes is for good people to do nothing. And what I worry about is that we just a little bit have a bit of Kiwi apathy that, well, it's not quite as bad and it'll solve itself eventually. There is a moment now where we have to act with urgency. We do have an opportunity and something special. If we act now, there is the opportunity to have a holistic, coherent plan. But if we leave it another 5 years, maybe not. If we leave it another 10 years, certainly not. And we would love you to walk away today inspired about the way New Zealanders, and I just think for me, this is magical New Zealand. This is a cross-section of Kiwis getting together. We're all volunteers, but we believe that there is something special to fight for. But our challenge is also we cannot apathetically leave it and hope and let wishful thinking, because if we leave it 5 years, we may lose the option. If we leave it 10 years, we absolutely lose the option. So we hope you walk away inspired, but also compelled that, that Churchill, for evil to prosper, for our forests to perish, all it takes is for good people to do nothing. And I know you're incredibly good people, and I think New Zealanders are incredibly good people. Now's the moment for us actually to do something. So thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you again for Sam and for WWF in this collaboration. It's really special to be part of, and again, we hope this is very much the end of the beginning, and we will be sharing online and other things in terms of, certainly from my perspective with the Next Foundation, we're really going to not just talk, but actually lean in with some real action and some real financing. I know WWF are doing the same thing. I know many in the room are doing that as well. So again, thank you for being here. We want you to walk away inspired, but also challenged that now's the time to act. Hey, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks for that, Andrew. Right. Well, that concludes our panel discussion. It is clear that recloaking papatūānuku is a true nature-based solution. It is ambitious, but it is what we urgently need to stem the tide of the biodiversity loss and climate crisis. We have created this mess. We can fix it, and we owe it to our mokopuna and those to come after them to find durable solutions to do it. Thank you again for joining us this special evening. You can also join us across the road at Backbenchers for a bit of a mixer. And please join me in welcoming our wonderful panelists this evening.
Look, I think I just came along here to see what the ice cream was going to be. I represent Ngā Whenua Rahui. Ko koutou mohana tēnei o tātou tuahutanga tēnei te mihi atu. We have a meeting on Friday here in Pōreke, and I will be discussing this with them. If you say we are to be enthused by this, I think we just need to understand. Koe no, a mātou nei whakaro, a hauka te pai o tēnei o ngā mea o te nāhere, ko papatūānuku ki tēnā, ko rangi nui e tū mai nā. It is that whole thing that we must also be a part of in order to understand where we are going. That is Ngā Whenua Rahui. And that is what we have been trying to do with our people, because if we take the sky, if we take the land, and then we take the ngāhere in the middle, then we can certainly grow our people. We need to whakaro a Ngā Whenua Rahui ki a koe katoa. Hoi anō, as Tiawa started this, I wanted to, on behalf of Ngāti Tūwharetoa, I'm looking at my very good mate down there. Tēnā koe e koe. Mai a Ngāti Tūwharetoa. I runga noi nā kaupapa kore haka nei, mo tēnei o tātou ngāhere. Nā whakaororanga tira mā tātou I tai a tina na mai runga noi te tika te pono te pai o wene o tātou whakaaro. If we do the right thing, then we will grow what needs to be grown. Kia ora tātou.